Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Hondo Carpenter, your beat writer for Sports Illustrated covering the Las Vegas Raiders. I apologize with my throat. I'm battling strep, but I'm not quitting, not taking a day off, working like a dog. Glad to be joined by my weekly partner, the great Jonathan Schott. John, as we get going today, I want to talk about the NIL. It is ruining college football, and it's not the players' fault. It's the NCAA, the administrators, the conferences, the coaches. They ruined the game. But it's helping the NFL. And I want to talk about this angle. I was told by coaches and general managers at the combine, it used to be that when you interviewed guys, you were trying to figure out how's money going to change them. Because there's a lot of guys that go to the league, they make a bunch of money, and it changes them. And they told me what really stood out to them this year at the combine, especially, was some of these guys had already made money and you could already see the change. And so it's why some guys dropped on draft boards. And it amazes me how no matter what happens, there's always a silver lining to almost everything. And so what's bad for the college game, what's ruining the college game is actually a blessing to the pros, isn't it?
Well, it certainly can be because you may have a preview of how a guy's going to handle his business, if you will. So, on maybe one end of the scale, because of the Hall of Fame bloodlines, we've got Marvin Harrison. We kind of know what he's about. He's a guy that's made NIL money. He's got a tremendous, obviously, resource bloodlines all around him, from his dad to anybody else really connected with his dad's career that he could maybe reach out to if he needed to. Gives teams an idea of, okay, how's this guy going to handle it? He's already got some. And there maybe are some other guys that there were question marks about. It's okay to think there must have been a question about a guy who I think we're both high on, Keon Coleman. He's a guy that comes to Michigan State, and if you're not aware of this yet, folks, you need to be aware of it. Goes there with the intention of, I'm probably going to play at two schools, a la Jaden Daniels. Because if I'm in the NFL, I'm probably going to be playing for more than one team. That's a modern reality. Same time, he gets some financial support or enticement to go transfer to Florida State. So it gives you a preview as a team of how's this guy going to handle not only a new situation, but how's he going to handle getting some money. And, well, for us to interact with him, we can get a feel. Does this guy feel like he's already made it? Can we see complacency threatening any of these athletes that have received some NIL? Do we maybe see a form of hunger driven by finances from a guy that we either did or did not want to see? We met with the defensive tackle, for example. He mentioned and seemed a little bit bitter that he wasn't getting more offers in the portal, or he didn't get more money than another guy on his team that he was clearly better than. It really reframes it. But for the NFL, picking these players, they're new to this too. There's an opportunity to get a further evaluation for a guy that you would otherwise not have. There obviously has never been somebody rolling in with the bags of money like we're seeing here. Even guys that were getting paid under the table, even some of the black marks that we've seen in college football in the past, they didn't provide guys who probably have bank accounts that have six figures in them. There may also be some guys that cause some worry, like you said, that maybe there's a reason that they fell. Motivation questions, behind the scenes questions, maybe some mistakes were made in prioritizing just how important is football to you. This is the most competitive business, arguably, in the country, and it's the absolute national present time. It's the most popular form of entertainment. These guys are pretty serious, and some of the coaches are remarkably serious about focus on football first, not the business. That's one thing that sticks in the craw of a lot of fans, and it should. Are your players on your team prioritizing their performance, their play, their team's outcomes first, second, third? Or are they more interested in their dollar bills, guaranteed money, positioning themselves for after football. And maybe some of those guys in the past, a couple quarterbacks come to mind that got shipped out. One's barely still in the NFL. The other one looks like he's on his last leg. These are all things in the mix now. It's just that they're in the mix now at the draft level, and that is absolutely brand new. Look, some teams are going to handle it better here in these middle 20s than other, but later in the decade, like you said, this is going to be absolutely par for the course.
John, I heard about one team that took a player off their board because he had been getting NIL money, but nobody talked to him about taxes. It was going to have a massive tax lien. I mean, the ramifications of what this is doing to college, and nobody with a brain is blaming the players. It's just a mess. All right, I got a text, and I want to read it to you. Can't say who, but it is a well-known college coach. Hondo, was listening to your interview with Bill Polian, was stunned, and played it for my entire staff when he talked about paying guys too much, because every guy in the locker room knows what everybody gets paid. OMG, with NIL now, this is a problem I experienced this year. Would have never foreseen it. Bill was awesome. The college football is becoming pro football without the contracts.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin, unlimited free agency is what he's called the current state of college football. That interview has been widely viewed. It will be widely viewed for a long time. And for those of us who have paid real close attention and watched arguably more NFL coverage than we need to over decades, we remember Bill Polian, very strong stint at ESPN. I don't remember him not once ever talking about that. And that may or may not be one of those topics that you're not allowed to talk about on ESPN or broadcast partners, which is a whole other threat to the NFL. We'll leave for another day. That really struck me because I hadn't heard it talked about before, but we know it exists. We've seen it tear teams apart. We've seen it just tear a couple college teams apart. You know, Keon Coleman went one way, his quarterback went another way. You're like, how did these guys get separated? How do they not go together? Where are they all going to end up? And these are just first impressions. We're talking about Peyton Thorne, who's at Auburn, and of course Keon, who looks like he's in a phenomenal spot in Buffalo, and he's already flashing that it factor, saying Tiger woulda, coulda, shoulda. Who ever thought of that? Tiger Woods been around for decades. Nobody ever mentioned that. That looks like a guy that's probably going to fit in to the Bills locker room. But you are coming now with a whole different set of tools. 53 guys around you, plus practice squad guys around you. How are they going to absorb whatever rookie is coming in with whatever bank account or whatever massive lawsuits, tax liens, etc. coming over his head? What Bill Polian said, absolutely true with the NFL with no doubt. The interesting thing is now it is taking a step down, and out of 105 guys on a college football team, how many is that affecting? Now, you may say, well, we're only talking about 20, 40 college football programs. Okay, but that's where most of the guys who are coming to the NFL are going to come from. So this is a real thing happening in real time. There's not a blueprint for it. If I was a major college football coach and I could get to Bill Polian, I would be getting to him. They got plenty of time. Don't buy all this. They're busy all the time through these spring and summer months. Pick up the phone. That guy knows something. It is an interesting note that neither him or Floyd, the guy that used to be the GM of the Titans way back when, all the other guys that we've seen over the years on NFL Live, maybe Mark Schlereth mentioned it once or twice about how that can get into a locker room. Not a lot of guys have talked about that. It is important.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. All right, I want to get to some topics around the NFL. Thumbs down on the Browns.
Thumbs down on the Browns. The Browns say, hey, it's Cleveland. We got a deal for you. We want a whole bunch of billions for a new stadium or a bunch for refurbishment. That stadium's not 25 years old, is it? The funny thing here is the NFL is big, profitable business, so are the Browns. Private business should be able to invest in its own infrastructure and do okay. The interesting thing here is we're following what we looked at Kansas City earlier this year, where they said thumbs down. What are taxpayers and voters going to suggest there in Cleveland? And also, we've got Chicago in the mix. Now, waiting in the wings, a massive project to come probably in the city of Washington, the redevelopment of the RFK area, which also included an arena, which is going to include more than just a football stadium. A lot of things swinging around, but it looks to me like we're tipping over a point where public stadium financing, people are saying, and I don't necessarily blame them. I think there's probably an argument to be made on both sides, but these are private businesses. The last time I looked at my favorite pizza joint or other joints like that, they were not getting massive, massive tax breaks. We're going to follow closely what happens in those Great Lakes state. I don't know why the Browns chose this as the time to stick their nose out. Let's see what their voters say.
So, John, I was talking to an NFL executive this past week who dropped a name for expansion that I would have never thought of. It blew my mind. I've never heard it, but it stunned me. Austin, Texas. Could you imagine a fourth NFL team? Excuse me, a third NFL team. I've heard San Antonio, but he said Austin. Does that not stun you?
As I have maybe tried to grasp a little more of population numbers, especially in Texas, it took me a long time to get my head around exactly where Texas A&M sits in that state geographically. When you look at the numbers of people that live there, no, it doesn't necessarily shock me. Now, Texas, University of Texas, enormous population, enormous football history. It's always going to be good. Is there enough besides that? Is there enough NFL interest to carry where Fridays matter a lot in Texas, Saturday into Sunday? It's possible. We've done some math here before. We talked about looking at an 18-game schedule, and now that's all coming out a little quicker than some folks thought. We talked about the 6x6x6. We also talked about potential expansion numbers. So it would surprise me if it was ever a random or a go it alone, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me based on population. When I think expansion, the first thing I look at now is like, where is a population? There's 10 million people in Los Angeles County. They got 2 football teams. There's 34 million other people in California. There's always an opportunity expansion when you think there, you think Florida. So I'm not terribly surprised, although the first thing you think of when you think of Austin sports is undoubtedly the powerhouse that is that University of Texas.
That blew my mind. I don't see it, but this person's a lot more connected than I am, and he saw it, and he started giving me the reasons why. All right. Matthew Stafford, in the interest of full disclosure, I know him in Kelly and appreciate him. Great, precious people. I think he's more motivated than ever. Sean McVay's one of the best motivators in the NFL. There's 3 kinds of coaches. There's the rah-rah, Pete Carroll, McVay type. There's the hard-nosed Bill Belichick type. And then there's the Antonio Pierce, which is the mix. McVay is the Pete Carroll type. He comes out and says, hey, Stafford can play as long as he wants. Talk about the motivated Stafford.
See, I don't know. That's really the question, and these guys have a tangential Georgia connection in that McVay played football a couple miles from where I am, and Stafford chose to go to school there to play for Mark Richt. Turned out to be a pretty good decision for his professional development. I don't know the level of motivation for Matt Stafford anymore. I really don't. I do get the idea that McVay is accepting the fact that this is kind of a year-by-year sport now. He's just seen an absolute Hall of Famer retire. It certainly appears like it would be for good. I don't know why in the world anybody would consider playing a defensive tackle position, take a year off, and come back. I don't see that in the cards. So now you've got Matt Stafford. There's always been a little bit of murk to me. there's been always been some guys in the media for understandable reasons trying to promote Stafford as better than his results when he was stuck in Detroit. And then they tried to kind of crown his career with the nice Super Bowl there in Los Angeles. And then you're kind of like, all right, is everything going to back off here? Is this guy really want to play? Well, at the end of the year last year, I saw the Rams on the move. I thought the Rams might make a deep run in those playoffs. So I would say it's uncertain. I don't know how motivated Matt Stafford is. His coach appears to have made the decision, if I'm going to do this, I've learned from my first years as a head coach, I'm not going to repeat this again. And it's not that I'm going to call the shots with personnel and stuff, but if you watch who's added and subtracted to the Rams, I think he's taken some things from best practices, best folks around the league, whether it's Mike Tomlin or others. I want to go with guys that want to go my way. I'm not here to convince anybody. So it's nice that those guys are in tune. Father Time is real, but I wonder how much the end of last year might be pushing Matt Stafford, because the Rams were maybe a little closer to making a pretty deep run. You're never too many pieces away. And in many estimations, Pete Carroll, many estimations, Sean McVay may have the fastest computer processor of a football mind of any head coach. He does have a photographic memory. I have a semi-photographic memory, which is great. This guy remembers exact plays from his high school and what was called and some other stuff. Practically, it seems like he can almost remember every single day in his life. If you're Matt Stafford, that's probably going to drive you to come to work and chase another Super Bowl. Because let's be real clear. If somehow the Rams got to or won another Super Bowl, Matt Stafford's legacy goes way, 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 way up.
I can tell you, Matt's motivated.
Nice.
He's one of the most motivated people I know. All right, let's talk about franchise family values. Ross just remains incredible.
I don't know what Stephen Ross says to be true or false. And the reason I say that, and we're of course talking about the idea that somebody offered him $10 billion for the Dolphins and a couple other things. I think there's unfortunately a history of Stephen Ross not necessarily telling the truth and getting into some disciplinary trouble for it. Now, I'm just practically Joe Schmo. Stephen Ross has developed putts and rods. He's yards and yards, done a ton of things in his career. I just have a hard time believing him on this one. There are other franchises that will come up for sale. We've talked about how one of us thinks that's going to be the Cardinals pretty soon. That may not include a Formula One track and some of the other stuff, but let's just pump the brakes on 10 billion, Stephen Ross. Let's see what actual offer comes to the table next. If it's in the neighborhood of 10 billion, we can say, hey, maybe this guy was accurate in what he said. I don't buy it at all at this time, and I don't know why this guy mentioned it. It's a strange thing to say, even if true. There's a lot of owners in the NFL that are remarkably close to the vest, historically speaking. And some of those, yes, they're further north and further east. This was a weird thing to say. I just don't know, and I find it hard to believe that 10 billion is the value that somebody offered for all that stuff, including the Dolphins.
All right, I'm going to tell you, I sent a text to someone who's very familiar with the inner dealings of the NFL. I can't say much because they literally can't be found out. And I asked them about this. And I'm going to read you what they said to me. I would be inclined to believe this because I know how bad Jeff Bezos wants into the league. And he's one of the few that would be willing to overpay to get in. Not saying it's accurate, I don't know. But I would think this would maybe be true. I thought that was interesting.
It's hard to explain to people who are under 30 for sure. But, there was a time in the 90s when Sports Illustrated was the authority, and I've still got the magazine. It's like, is the NFL done? What can we do to spice up the NFL? Is it going backwards? Is it going the wayside? And then somewhere in the early era, the HDTV era, when the Steelers became America's team, sorry if you don't want to hear that. They just did. Steelers and Ravens, tremendous. The NFL just took off, and it's keep that kind of progress that's kept going. So if that's anywhere close to true, what a humongous compliment to a lot of people, and also a tremendous amount of good luck. You couldn't ask, you think about luck in life. How in the world you got an asset that's worth something and it increases in value to that much? You can't even conceive of that. The biggest point is the demand for the NFL product just gets stronger and stronger right now.
I agree. All right, let's turn our attention. Projected as the worst top 10 pick in the 2000s, the fallout of Pennock at 8 for the Falcons. Now, I want to put this in context because I don't say this braggadociously, but anytime we deal with somebody that I have a personal relationship, I think it's important for the interest of full disclosure to acknowledge that. I know that Kurt was not upset by the pick. Kurt wasn't mad about the pick. He's basically got $100 million guaranteed. Pennock is 24, almost 25. He's going to be basically 27 when the Falcons can move on from Kurt. I don't have a problem with him picking a successor. Then why not go get a 21-year-old McCarthy who, when Kurt can be moved on from, he's still younger than Pennock now. This was a terrible pick. And I want to read you another text. Quote, "This is why the Falcons are the Falcons. They are one of those teams, consistently bad drafters, consistently making mistakes, consistently shooting themselves in the foot. This is a case of a GM overthinking it rather than being smart and being an investor like Telesco. He wants to be a gambler. Dumbest pick in a long time."
Yeah, I think it could go down to be the dumbest pick of this entire century, and we're only 25 years into it. And it's not a knock on Michael Pennock. I don't know him personally, but I covered him since a million years ago at Indiana, multiple injuries ago. Michael Pennock at 8. Not only does it not make sense, we're going to talk about a different angle. What does it tell the Falcons? What does it tell their veterans? The idea is their division stinks. We're going to bring this guy in who's playing as good as ever. Nobody works harder, is more prepared than Kirk Cousins. He's already got a connection here. We're going to take a shot to win this division for the years to come. And you know what? You get in the playoffs, pretty much anything can happen. We've got a chance to get back in the Super Bowl mix, which the Falcons were in a couple of times within the last decade. All of a sudden, you've just told your entire football team, either we don't care that much, we don't think we're that good, or we think you guys are already so good and we're already so great, we're going to take one hand and tie it behind your backs for a couple years. We're talking about the most ultra premium pick in the draft, top 10. We heard Bill Polian talk about it. My angle is this. What does that say to the other players on that football team? Ross Tucker writes for the 33rd team, among other things he did. He did a great article talking about the perspective from a veteran. This just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think there's any chemistry management by the GM or the coach. You're talking about the 8th pick in the draft? I thought Michael Pennock would make a lot of sense in a place like Las Vegas, maybe New York Jets as a stopgap, somewhere where he could play immediately because his shelf life is a little shorter. It's expected to be shorter. He's already very injured. He's already very experienced. What in the world? When's the last time we've seen anybody drafted in that kind of spot for that kind of team and put on the shelf? I don't remember a top 10 pick. That's the problem here. The Falcons had needs that had to be addressed. When you look at the needs pecking order, I don't think the quarterback for the 2027 or beyond Falcons was anywhere up there. And this may all fall by the wayside in week 1. Kirk Cousins may be knocked out for whatever reason. That's all true. But based on what was done there, what I saw, the owner, and we all saw the owner reaction of Arthur Blank, like, what are you doing? I think he's going to, if there's ever time to fire somebody right on the spot, just send him out the door. Because what he did, what the Falcons have done, is handicapped. They put a handicap. They tied a hand behind their back, or I'm talking about a golf handicap type thing, on this football team. And also, they might have just given a little extra motivation to the other teams in that division. I'm not talking about Carolina, please. But these guys in Atlanta think they're already so good, or think so little of their current roster, that they're thinking 3 or 4 years down the road as if there will be no quarterback available for free agency again, as if there will be no draftable prospect again, and as if it's going to be in the best interest of Michael Pennock to, at best, split some time during what is, he is very quickly going to have to enter the prime of his career. That's the point with his age. Like, his prime is coming real soon. This isn't like 1 year,
right
2
now,
years.
right now.
Like, boom. So that's where I thought he might have made some sense for somebody like the Jets, who may be like, maybe the Raiders, some other folks. But this looks like it is going to be clearly the lead candidate for worst top 10 pick in the entire century so far.
All right, now let's turn to Jaden Daniels. Now, you knew this because I talked to you privately. I mean, you're one of my very best friends in all the world, and there are things I can share with you. But we said in January that, actually said it right after the Super Bowl, the Commanders were not moving. And I was told by the same person that said not moving, and you know who told me, that we're taking Caleb or Jaden, nobody else. So all of the smoke screens and everything else, to me, were just humorous. And it was because fans really got, because it's amazing is we would take criticism. Oh, Hondo, you're just, being a shill for Aiden. No, I wasn't. If they could have got him, great. But he wasn't going to be there. Wasn't going to happen. And so what a smokescreen that was. And man, a lot of people bought it.
Yeah, they did. It was a little bit of a surprise. It was a little bit of a surprise that they bought the smokescreen. But let's talk about what the Commanders got. They've got people in their organization who come from places that they should know what they're doing, and Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. And a couple things that stand out to me is what Quinn and Peters have said about Daniels playing in more than one system already. I think he probably benefited by going in with Brian Kelly because there's a lot to benefit from there. And also, I want to talk about the perspective of Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. But Dan Quinn has been game planning for some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a number of years now at a very high level. He has also seen young guys come in who some people think may not be NFL ready right now. Maybe one guy that started for the Giants who's looked atrocious at times and other times okay. But the point is, from a defensive perspective, Dan Quinn's evaluation of a quarterback is a little bit unique. Way back when, Joe Gibbs told me that Richie Pettibone, his defensive coordinator, would do a better job identifying which quarterback would be tougher to play against because of his perspective. I'm not here to grandstand and say, here come the Commanders, here comes Washington football team, we're going into high gear. But the process that they took to get where they did with Daniels, and the things that stand out to me are what Adam Peters and what Dan Quinn were looking for and why they feel like he checks so many boxes. We're not going to find out exactly what they thought about all the other quarterbacks that were in there, but there's a really good chance that they didn't think that. There's also a really good chance that they saw a drop-off at some point. What I am curious about is we saw such a gap between the last first-round quarterback and then when Spencer Rattler was taken. What are the guys from Rattler on? Do we see them in the NFL in coming years? Does one of them turn out to become a starter or a star like Cousins did from back pretty far? This will be the interesting thing to me. And if they do, how do the qualities match up with a guy like Daniels based on what the Commanders identified him to have to say, hey, we want to ride with you? The last thing I would say is sometimes I think we discount just how much, not easier, but how much more comfortable it is to be the second pick versus the first. There is a disproportionate amount of hype and attention and focus on Caleb Williams, and that will stay there. And Jaden Daniels is going to settle in just a little bit. That's not to say there's no attention, no hype, but there's a huge difference from 1 to 2, and I think he's got a decent advantage in that he wasn't picked first, regardless of the team. So let's see what this guy does between the day he gets to Data Center Alley, which is where Commander's Park is, or whatever they're calling it now. Let's see what he does from here through the time that they decide to name a starter. We know Marcus Mariota is there and he's capable. Let's see what he does, because what Peters and Quinn have identified and what they've gone on record saying is pretty strong, and I think it provides a blueprint for what you need if you have an NFL-ready quarterback who's ready to start right away.
So, John, I ask you, we know statistically there were 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round. 3 to 4 are going to be busts. Of those 6, who's going to be the biggest bust? I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's Bo Nix or Caleb Williams. I was stunned. Now, I had told you privately, I had heard from people, Drew Stanton was on this show, who's got a company that gives us, that you can get, NFL teams can purchase his evaluations. But teams that, I had one person literally say to me, that's the arrogance of Sean Payton. Get him away from Mickey Loomis, and he thinks he can make anybody a quarterback, like Josh McDaniels said when he was with Denver. I think Bo Nix is the biggest bust. I think Caleb Williams has the biggest upside with the most red flags. Give me 2 guys. Who do you think the 2 biggest busts are? Or the 2 biggest, sure.
Yeah, and then look, and injuries and circumstance are a huge part of this. I've talked to NFL people before that have said, the circumstance that you're picked in is more important than just about anything. Use the 12 draft, for example, Cousins and Russell Wilson. If they're picked by other teams, their careers are going in a whole different way. When we talk about this kind of stuff, we're talking about initial expectations, which is why I think, unfortunately or not, Williams are higher than anybody. And that makes it tougher for him to live up to them. What would not be a bust? If Caleb Williams is a really strong NFL starter with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, but they don't win the they don't win the NFC, does that mean bust? I don't know. I am worried about Williams. I'm worried most about Bo Nix and Michael Pennock. I think Michael Pennock is in a really tough spot. I don't see, unless something happens and the cards flow for him, I don't think we're ever going to be able to find out how good of an NFL quarterback he could be, because I think he's going to get stale. Bo Nix is more of a head scratcher to me, and it looks from the outside like it is not an arrogance play, but a really borderline arrogance play by Sean Payton saying, I see that. I don't care what anybody else sees. I can turn that into what I want and what I need it to be. My thinking would be, you lucked out beyond belief with one of the greatest passers in football history. A guy wanted that guy in Miami, and he was right the entire time, named Nick Saban. And this kind of worked out really well for you, and you guys struck gold. Makes a career. What an unbelievable story. You think you're going to do that twice with a guy here that maybe has more work to do and not the football. It's not just football IQ with Drew Brees. It was so fast. He was so fast knowing what to do. That's why he played for forever, practically. He probably could still play. The busts I like are Pennock and not necessarily his fault, and Bo Nix. The upside, I do think Daniels has the most upside. I do it's just natural to worry about injury. For now, he gets the benefit of the doubt, but that could turn south pretty quickly. The guy that intrigues me the most, the guy that I think is going to be maybe most different from draft to peak of career, I would put Daniels. And then I think Drake May is going to be very interesting to watch because he wasn't from a super necessarily developmental college program, but he got some good coaching. That's the guy I want to watch most. And obviously he's going to really a fresh start as well.
John, last one, Fields to make a return.
Listen, I understand and I'm excited for the kicking game to come back. We all are. But the idea floated that the Steelers may send Justin Fields back to take returns is probably not something that should have been said out loud. Even if the Steelers have this idea and they already see the numbers and they're like, hey man, you got long legs, you get going, you're down the field, we're going to send you back to return kicks. Is this how you want to roll that out? I don't think so. I think you want it to be by surprise. I think you want it to be presented and give the player a chance to say, hey, I'll do whatever the team wants, and then have the people follow the crumbs and say, hey, maybe he can return kicks. This is a strange thing. I'm curious, like, what's Mike Tomlin's involvement with this? And what is he doing when he sees this story? Is he making a call? Is he sending a text? Is he having to do extra work that he didn't want anything to have to do with? Drew Stanton. We all remember it. If you're a super fan of football, Michigan State or Nebraska, you remember also when he got his knee blown up, covering a kick.
At the Alamo Bowl.
At the absolutely dirty Alamo Bowl. There's no call for that. If you send Justin Fields back to return one kick, after probably a special call from Jason Sehorn saying, hey, I don't know if that's that great of an idea, you have basically mortgaged his future as a quarterback and said you're not going to be a quarterback anymore. That's okay if those guys have that discussion and that's what they want to do. We saw Terrell Pryor try to transition. We've seen Braxton Miller, other guys transition out to other positions. What in the world are we talking about here? Did I miss something? Did they bring Justin Fields to Pittsburgh to be a slash player or to consider returning kicks? This is a very strange story. First of its kind. Let's see if any other quarterback in the NFL this spring and summer is positioned or premised into the air as a kick or punt returner. No way, Jose. Crazy.
Agreed. Hey, John, give everybody your Twitter handle.
I am at JP Spartan. That is the experience that is X, Twitter X.
Love having John on each and every week to go over the NFL with us here on the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. Remember, follow me on IG at Hondo SR and X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to at Hondo Carpenter and SI.com /NFL /Raiders. Thanks, everybody.